Okay, so what we're going to work on today is being able to add or subtract radicals. We talked Friday about multiplying radicals, and we're actually going to go back to multiplying radicals tomorrow, but I need to teach you how to add or subtract these radicals before we can move on with what we need to. So today, remember to take notes and to upload a picture of your notes with your assignments so that you can get credit for that. Okay, so here are the steps to adding or subtracting radical expressions. Remember, a radical is just like that square root symbol. Okay, you're going to simplify each radical that's in the problem. Usually only a few of them, or maybe even one, can actually be simplified. So usually that step doesn't take a real long time. And then you're going to combine like terms. And you kind of have to know what a like term with a radical would be. For it to be a like term, it has to have the same index, which, remember, if you're looking at the square root symbol, your radical symbol, the index is here, this little number. And if there's not a number, then it's an understood 2. And then the radicand also has to be the same, and that's the number that's underneath. Okay, so now there's usually, or a lot of times, there's a coefficient, there's a number in front. That doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be the same. But your index and your radicand do have to be the same in order for them to be considered like terms. So I've got some random radicals wrote down here, and I want us to just kind of go through and see what would be considered like terms. So on this one, we have a cube root of 2x. So in order for something to be a like term with it, it also has to be a cube root, and it also has to have a 2x underneath it. So the only other one would be the 4 cube root of 2x. Notice that they both are cube roots. They both have a 3 as the index, and then they both have a 2x as the radicand. So that makes those like terms. Okay, let's look at this one. So I have 5 cube root of 3. In order to have a like term with it, I would have to have another cube root of 3. And in this case, I don't see any other cube roots of 3, so that one doesn't have a like term. Next one here, I have a square root of 2. In order for it to be a like term, it does also have to have a square root of 2. Negative 1 square root 2 has a square root and a 2, so those two would be considered like terms. So these we could combine together, and those two we could combine together. Okay, let's do some examples. Okay, so I have 3 radical 5 plus 2 radical 5. Now if I tried to do a factor tree and simplify radical 5, 5 only goes to 1 and 5. I can't simplify those two radicals. However, I do realize that that's supposed to be a highlighter. Wait just a second. I do realize that this has a square root 5, and this also has a square root 5. So these are what we would consider like terms. So all we need to do to add those together is to add the coefficients. So 3 plus 2, so that would give me 5. And then radical 5 just goes behind it. It's kind of like a variable. If you had 3x plus 2x, it's just going to be 5x. Okay, so 5 radical 5 would be our answer. Okay, let's try this one. So we have negative 2 radical 6 minus 3 radical 6. With those, both of them have a radical 6, and radical 6 does not simplify, because if I try to do a factor tree with 6, I just get 2 and 3. So those are like terms because they both have a square root 6. So I'm going to combine the coefficients. So negative 2 minus 3. Negative 2 minus 3 is negative 5. And then I get radical 6 behind it. So negative 5 radical 6. Okay, now I have 3 radical 5 minus 2 radical 45. Now notice I have a radical 5. We've already said that doesn't simplify. And I have a radical 45. Now I can't combine those together because one has a 5 under it, one has a 45 under it. But I'm going to take the 45 and I'm going to see if I can't simplify that some. So 45 can be 5 and 9. 9 is 3 and 3. So right now I have radical 5 and 3 and 3 underneath the radical symbol, and I have this -2 in front. And it has a complete set of 3's. So that complete set of 3's is going to have to go outside of the radical. So I'm going to have the -2 that's already there times the 3 that's coming out, and then a square root 5, which is staying underneath. So that gives me -6 radical 5. So notice -2 radical 5 is turning into -6 radical 5. So now my problem is 3 radical 5 minus 6 radical 5. Now both of those do have a radical 5, so they are like terms. So I'm going to just subtract 3 minus 6, and that gives me -3, and then radical 5. Okay, let's try another one. I have -3 radical 6 and -3 radical 24. So if I try to do the radical 6, that just gives me 2 and 3, so that doesn't simplify. So I'm just going to drop that one down. But 24 can be 2 and 12. 12 can be 2 and 6, and 6 can be 2 and 3. So I have a -3 already on the outside. And underneath now I have 1, 2, 3 3's and a 3. So I have a complete set of 2's. So I'm going to pull that set of 2 outside, and then 2 times 3 left over, which would be 6. So I get -6 radical 6, which is replacing -3 radical 24. Okay, so I've got -3 radical 6 from the first part of the problem, and then minus 6 radical 6. Now they are both a radical 6, so I'm going to just do -3 minus 6, which is -9, and then that radical 6 goes behind it. And that's my final answer. Okay, I have 3 radical 8 plus 3 radical 18. 8 goes into 2 and 4 goes into 2 and 2. So I'm actually going to be able to simplify that one. So I have 3 on the outside, and then I have 3 2's on the inside. There is a complete set of 2's. So 3 times 2 on the outside, and then there's a 2 left over. So I'm left with 6 radical 2. Now I'm going to go over here with the 18. And that is 2 and 9, and then 3 and 3. So I have a 3 on the outside already. Under the radical, I have a 2, and then I have 2 3's. So I have a set of 3's. So I have a 3 already on the outside. Now I have a set of 3's that's going to come to the outside, and then a 2 that's left over. So 3 times 3 is 9, and then radical 2. Now both of those have a radical 2 at the end of it, so they are what we would call like terms. So I'm going to just add the coefficients, so 6 plus 9, which gives me 15, and then radical 2. Okay, now this is the same process, it's just now I have 3 of them instead of 2 of them. Radical 2, that's not going to simplify any, it would just be 2 and 1. Radical 6, that would just be 2 and 3, so that's not going to simplify. And then you also have another radical 6, which again is not going to simplify. So now I'm just going to look to see if there's any like terms. Well, I have a radical 2 here, but I don't have any other radical 2's. I have a radical 6, and I do have another radical 6. So this term and this term are what we would consider like terms. So I'm going to add those together. So add your coefficients, 2 plus 2, and I get 4, and then keep your radical 6 with it. And then this 3 radical 2 just gets dropped down in front. And there's your final answer because you can't combine those two together. Okay, next one I have a negative radical 5 minus radical 6 plus 2 radical 6. So radical 5, I can't simplify that. Radical 6, I can't simplify that. So now I'm just going to look to see if there's like terms. I have a radical 5, but there's no other radical 5s, so that's part of my final answer. And then I have a radical 6 and a 2 radical 6, so those are like terms. So I'm going to do negative 1 plus 2, which is going to give me 1, and then radical 6. Now you don't have to necessarily put the 1 there because it's understood, so you could have just written it as negative radical 5 plus radical 6, and that means the same thing. Oh, and you could also see it written radical 6 minus radical 5. That means the exact same thing as well because notice that the signs are correct, okay? Let's try another one. So I have a negative 3 radical 5 and a 3 radical 5. And then I have a negative 3 radical 18. So the radical 5s don't simplify, but the 18 does. So let's simplify that. So I got 2 and 9, 3 and 3. So I have a negative 3 that's already on the outside. Radical 2 times 3 times 3. So I have a set of 3's. I didn't want that to be green. So negative 3 times, there's a 3 that's coming out now because I had a set. And then radical 2, so that's negative 9 radical 2. Okay, so I went from negative 3 radical 18 down to negative 9 radical 2. And I'm going to just bring down the rest of my problem. So 3 radical 5, negative 3 radical 5, plus 3 radical 5. Okay, so now let's look to see if I have any like terms. I have a radical 5 here, and I have another radical 5. So those two are like terms. And then I had a radical 2, but there's no other radical 2's. So I'm going to go ahead and combine these together. Negative 3 plus 3, that's going to give me 0. So 0 radical 5 is just 0. So that actually canceled out. So all you're left with is a negative 9 radical 2. And that's your final answer. Okay, let's do another one. So on this one I have a radical 5, negative radical 5, plus a 3 radical 5, plus a 3 radical 2. So the radical 5, the radical 5, and the radical 2, none of those are going to simplify. So now I'm just going to see if I have any like terms. So I have a radical 5, I have another radical 5, and then I have a radical 2, but no other radical 2's. So let's go ahead and combine what are like terms. So negative 1 plus 3 is going to give me negative 2. Sorry, that'd be a positive 2. And then I'd have a radical 5 behind it. And then I've got plus 3 radical 2 because it did not have a like term. And there's your final answer. Okay, one more. I've got negative radical 2 plus 2 radical 18 plus 3 radical 2. The only one that's going to simplify is the 2 radical 18. So 18 goes to 2 and 9, and then 3 and 3. You have a 2 already on the outside, a radical 2 times 3 times 3. You have a set of 3's. So you'd have 2 times 3 on the outside with a 2 left on the inside. That gives us 6 radical 2. So that was this part of the problem. And now I'm going to just drop down the rest of it. So negative radical 2 plus 6 radical 2 minus 3 radical 2. Now let's see what is like terms. So we have a radical 2, another radical 2, and another radical 2. So they're actually all like terms. So we're going to combine those together. Got a negative 1 plus 6 minus 3. So negative 1 plus 6 is going to give me 5. And then minus 3 is going to give me 2. So 2 radical 2. And there's your final answer. Okay, so I tried to give you multiple examples today. I know some of you said that it would be more helpful if I gave more examples. So I tried to do that. You do have a worksheet to complete today. Please write your answers on a separate sheet of paper and submit a copy of that work and also a copy of your notes. And I am going to provide the example or the answers for today, so you do have to show your work, okay? We do have a Google Meet. This is an optional Meet, but this is a good opportunity to get on and get some help if you're needing help. Also, if you need me at all, just go ahead and email me or use the Remind app to let me know that you need help. I hope you guys have a good Monday.